A prince posed as a servant to spy on his bride. What he discovered made him fall to his knees. The church bell tolls. A prince throws off his crown and pulls on the livery of a lowly footman. Dust swirls as carriage wheels rattle toward. Grand estate. He believes his bride-to-be is vain and cruel. But when he kneels in the servants' chapel, watching her slip bread to the hungry and cradle the sick, his heart shudders. By candlelight, he overhears her whisper her dread that the prince she must marry is arrogant, incapable of love. And she speaks these words to the very man she unknowingly adores. But secrets can never stay hidden. When the mask is torn, away before the king in court, her world collapses in scandal and his in shame. Now, one act of deception could destroy two houses, sore forge a bond stronger than crowns. Will she ever forgive the prince who lied, or will the kingdom watch? Love itself fall to its knees? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button. For Mordaunt painted the royal palace of Hohenfeld in soft golden light as Prince Alaric stood before the ornate windows of his father's study. The morning air held autumn's crispness, but inside, tension made the room feel stifling. King Leopold's commanding presence filled the space as he delivered the news that would change everything. "You shall marry Lady Elsbeth of Albrecht," the king declared, his tone brooking. No argument. "The alliance will strengthen both our houses." He stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Every inch the ruler who expected immediate obedience. Alaric's heart sank. He had heard troubling whispers about Lady Elsbeth at court, tales of a noblewoman who delighted in luxury and social climbing. "Father, the decision is made." King Leopold's stern gaze softened slightly. "Son, a prince's duty is to his kingdom first. Love may come later." Later that morning, Alaric sought refuge in the palace library, where his old tutor, Master Heinrich, sat among towers of leather-bound books. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, dust motes dancing in the air as Alaric paced the worn carpet. "These rumors about Lady Elsbeth trouble me deeply," Alaric confessed. "They say she thinks only of status and wealth. How can I bind myself to such a woman?" Master Heinrich's weathered face creased thoughtfully. "Perhaps, my prince, you should not trust in rumors alone. There are ways to learn the truth of someone's character." "What do you mean?" "The truest nature of a person shows itself when they believe no one of consequence watches." The old tutor's eyes twinkled. "K's servant sees all, yet remains invisible." Two noble eyes. The idea took root in Alaric's mind like a seed finding fertile soil. "You suggest I go in disguise?" "As a servant, it would be unprecedented, yes." Master Heinrich stroked his gray beard. "But how better to know the lady's heart than to observe her daily conduct toward those she considers beneath her?" The plan formed quickly after that. Alaric summoned his most trusted personal servant, young William, who agreed to exchange clothes. With him, the fine blue wool of Alaric's coat was replaced by William's sturdy brown livery. His signet ring and other marks of rank were carefully hidden away. "Remember," William cautioned as he helped Alaric rough up his hands to look more like a working man's. "Bolos speak little and never meet a noble's eyes directly. You are Thomas now, a simple footman seeking employment." The journey to Albrecht Hall took 2 long days by carriage. Autumn rains had turned the roads to mud, making travel slow and jarring. Alaric found himself grateful for the sturdy servant's cloak as cold winds whipped across the countryside. Each mile brought him closer to the truth about his intended bride. As dusk descended on the second day, Albrecht Hall finally came into view. The grand estate rose from carefully tended gardens, its windows glowing with warm candlelight against the darkening sky. Alaric's heart beat faster as the carriage approached. Somewhere within those walls, Lady Elsbeth went about her evening routine. Unaware that her future husband watched from below, Sir Edmund, the Albrecht steward, met him. At the servants' entrance, he was a dignified man with graying temples and keen eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "So you seek a position as footman?" he asked, examining the letter of recommendation William had helped forge. "Yes, sir," Ulrich replied, keeping his gaze appropriately lowered. "I am called Thomas, and I will work hard to prove my worth." "Very well," the steward nodded briskly. "Follow me to the servants' quarters. We'll start tomorrow at dawn." As they walked through the castle's lower passages, Alaric caught glimpses of the life he would now lead. Maids hurrying past with armfuls of linens, kitchen boys carrying heavy trays, the smell of bread baking and beeswax candles burning. The servants' quarters were plain but clean, with narrow beds lined up in rows. "This will be your bed," Sir Edmund indicated. "Rest well. Morning comes early here at Albrecht Hall." Alone at last, Alaric sat on the thin mattress, his noble upbringing making the humble surroundings feel strange and confining. Yet determination strengthened his resolve. Here, among the servants, he would discover Lady Elsbeth's true nature, whether she deserved the love he hoped to give, or if the rumors of her character would prove devastatingly true. The chapel bells had not yet rung when Alaric woke to the sounds of servants stirring in their narrow beds. Darkness still cloaked Albrecht Hall, broken only by the faint glow of a single candle as the footman prepared for another day of service. The thin mattress had given him a restless night, so different from his feather bed at the palace. "Up with you, then," Thomas called James, a senior footman with kind eyes. "Best get to the washing basin before the water grows any colder." Alaric shuffled to the crude wooden basin, fighting back a gasp as he splashed the icy water on his face. Other servants crowded around him, their conversations soft and drowsy in the pre-dawn quiet. The rough cloth of his borrowed livery scratched against his skin as he dressed, fumbling slightly with the unfamiliar fastenings in the servants' hall. Breakfast waited plain porridge in wooden bowls, served with weak tea. Alaric watched the others add precious pinches of sugar to their portions, treating the sweetener like gold dust. His own bowl seemed to hold more lumps than actual porridge, but hunger made even this humble fare welcome. "New man, you will start with the boots," announced Sir Edmund, appearing suddenly beside their table. "Then help Timothy with the firewood for the great hall. After that, water needs fetching for the kitchen." The boot room proved to be a cramped space filled with rows of leather footwear, waiting to be cleaned and polished. Alaric's shoulders ached as he bent over each pair, trying to remember how he had seen his own servants perform this task countless times before. The polish stained his fingers black, and sweat dampened his collar despite the morning chill. Carrying firewood with Timothy proved even more challenging. The logs were heavy, and splinters caught at his palms as they stacked the wood beside the massive hearth in the great hall. Water came next, bucket after bucket, from the well to the kitchen, each one seeming heavier than the last, as morning light filled the great hall. Voices and footsteps announced the arrival of the family. For breakfast, Alaric straightened from his work, stealing his first glimpse of Lady Elsbeth as she entered beside her father, Lord Albrecht. She moved with natural grace, her morning dress a subtle shade of blue that complemented her fair complexion. Her features were fine and delicate, but something in her bearing seemed reserved, almost distant. She barely glanced at the servants as she passed, focusing instead on her father's conversation about estate matters. "Too fine to notice the likes of us," Timothy whispered, but there was no malice in his tone, only acceptance of the natural order of things. The day passed in a blur of endless tasks, each one revealing to Alaric just how much work went into maintaining a great house. As evening approached, he found himself in a quiet corridor, resting his aching back against a cool stone wall. Footsteps made him straighten quickly, but instead of moving away, he found himself drawing back into the shadows. Lady Elsbeth passed by, carrying something that made his eyes widen in surprise, a covered basket that seemed quite heavy. Curiosity overcame propriety, and he followed at a discreet distance as she made her way to the servants' kitchen. There, he witnessed something remarkable. Lady Elsbeth personally delivering food to the cook, speaking in low, concerned tones about someone named Mary. "Poor thing hasn't kept a bite down all day," the cook was saying. "This broth might help, if you're sure you can spare the time." "Milady, of course I can spare it," Lady Elsbeth replied, her voice warm with genuine concern. "Mary has served us faithfully for years. The least I can do is sit with her a while. Alaric watched in growing amazement as she carried the broth herself to the servants' quarters, where she spent over an hour tending to a sick maid. Her gentleness with the elderly servant, the way she cooled Mary's forehead with a damp cloth and helped her sip the broth, spoke of a compassion that no court gossip had ever mentioned. When all was quiet, Alaric found his way to the chapel. Moonlight filtered through the stained glass, casting colored shadows across the stone floor as he knelt before the altar. The smell of beeswax candles and ancient wood surrounded him as he bowed his head. "Lord, guide me," he whispered, his heart full of confusion and unexpected hope. The rumors spoke of pride and ambition, yet today I saw such kindness. Help me understand the truth of what I witness here. Father Anselm's soft footsteps approached from behind, but Alaric remained kneeling, lost in prayer and the growing realization that Lady Elsbeth might be very different from what he had been led to believe. The second evening brought a chill to Albrecht Hall's stone corridors. Alaric balanced a silver tray holding a decanter of wine and a single crystal glass, carefully making his way toward Lady Elsbeth's private study. The steward had given him precise instructions: deliver the wine, bow, and leave without a word. As he approached the heavy oak door, voices drifted through the gap where it stood slightly ajar. He recognized Lady Elsbeth's gentle tone, now touched with an unusual strain of emotion. "Oh, Marta, what am I to do?" Lady Elsbeth's words carried clearly, to where Alaric stood frozen. "This arranged marriage to Prince Alaric, I cannot bear the thought." Alaric's hands tightened on the silver tray. He knew he should announce himself, but something held him still. "Surely the prince cannot be as bad as the rumors say, milady," Marta replied soothingly. "Every report speaks of his arrogance, his cold manner at court." Lady Elsbeth's voice grew heavy with despair. "They say he shows no compassion for those beneath him. How can I spend my life bound to someone incapable of true kindness?" The words struck Alaric like physical blows. Each criticism pierced deeper than the last, made worse by the genuine distress in her voice. He had come to test her character, only to find his own being judged and found wanting. "Father insists the alliance is necessary," Lady Elsbeth continued. Softly, "I know my duty, but my heart rebels at the thought of a loveless union." Alaric backed away silently, setting the tray on a nearby table. His pulse thundered in his ears as he retreated down the corridor. That night, sleep eluded him. As he lay on his narrow bed, her words echoing in his mind. The next morning dawned gray and blustery. As Alaric carried firewood to the kitchen, he noticed a shutter banging loose near Lady Elsbeth's study. Without thinking, he found tools in the servants' workroom and climbed carefully out onto the narrow ledge. The repair was simple enough, for hands accustomed to caring for his own hunting equipment, though the height made his heart race. Later that day, he saw Lady Elsbeth struggling with a heavy basket of linens. Moving quietly, he lifted it from her arms before she could object. "Allow me, milady," he murmured, keeping his eyes downcast as protocol demanded. "Thank you," she paused, studying him. "Thomas, isn't it?" He nodded, carrying the basket where she directed. Throughout the day, he found other small ways to ease her burden. building fires in chilly rooms before she entered, ensuring fresh water was always available in her study, placing cushions in the chapel where she knelt for evening. Prayers the following day brought rain, and with it, more opportunities for quiet service. Alaric noticed Lady Elsbeth's favorite reading spot in the library, growing dark as clouds gathered. Without drawing attention, he trimmed and lit extra candles, arranging them to cast warm light over her books. When she entered later, a small smile touched her lips at the thoughtful preparation. On the fourth night, as Alaric laid a fire in her study, Lady Elsbeth spoke directly to him. "Thomas, I wish to thank you properly." He straightened, careful to maintain his servant's posture, though his heart leaped at her words. "These past days, I've noticed your kindness," she continued, her eyes soft with genuine appreciation. The repaired shutter, the fires always lit, the little courtesies that make such a difference. You serve with true humility. You are most welcome, milady, he managed, his voice rough with emotion. It is my honor to serve. Her gentle smile haunted him as he lay awake that night, guilt and longing warring in his chest. The deception that had seemed so reasonable now felt like a weight pressing against his ribs. Every kind word she spoke to Thomas was based on a lie. Yet his growing feelings for her were utterly true. The moonlight streaming through the small servants' window offered no answers as Alaric tossed restlessly. He had come to judge her character, and instead found himself enchanted by her genuine compassion and quiet strength. Now, lying sleepless in the dark, he wondered if he would lose both her trust and her heart. When the truth finally came to light, morning sunlight painted the frost-touched gardens in gleaming silver as Alaric waited near the servants' entrance. Lady Elsbeth had requested his attendance for her morning walk, ostensibly to carry her heavy winter cloak. His heart quickened at the thought of spending time in her company, even as guilt gnawed at his conscience. "Good morning, Thomas, lady." Elsbeth greeted him, her cheeks already pink from the crisp autumn air. She wore a simple blue walking dress, her golden hair tucked neatly beneath a matching bonnet. "Good morning, milady." He bowed, accepting her thick wool cloak with careful hands. They set out along the graveled path, past beds of late-blooming chrysanthemums and into the wider estate grounds. Lady Elsbeth walked slowly, her steps measured as though deep in thought. Finally, she spoke. "Tell me, Thomas, what do you think of the tenant cottages we pass on the northern road?" Alaric considered carefully before answering. "They seem need of care, milady, indeed." She stopped, turning to face him with unexpected intensity. "Do you know I've been gathering my dowry since I was 16 years old? Father allows me to keep a portion of the estate's income each year." "A wise provision, milady," he replied, curious where this confidence led. "Others expect me to spend it on silk gowns and jewels for my trousseau." She smiled, but there was determination in her eyes. "But I have different dreams. Those cottages need new roofs before winter. The village children need a proper schoolroom, not just lessons in the church when Father Anselm has time." Alaric listened, amazed, as she outlined her plans with precise detail: costs for timber and slate, wages for local craftsmen, supplies for the schoolroom. This was no idle noble's fantasy, but a carefully considered plan born of genuine concern for her people. Their path led them toward the village, where the morning bread was just emerging from the communal ovens. Lady Elsbeth approached the baker's wife with warm familiarity. "Good morning, Mrs. Cooper. I trust you received my message about the extra loaves." "Yes, milady, baked fresh this morning." The woman gestured to several cloth-wrapped bundles. Alaric watched as Lady Elsbeth personally distributed the bread to waiting families, speaking quietly with each one. She knew their names, asked after sick children, offered words of encouragement to tired mothers. These were not the actions of a vain noble woman seeking praise, but of someone who truly cared for her people's welfare. That evening, as the servants gathered in the warm kitchen for their supper, an unexpected figure appeared in the doorway. Lady Elsbeth stood there, carrying a covered dish. "Please, don't rise," she said quickly as chairs scraped back. "I brought apple tarts from tonight's dessert. There are far too many for the dining room alone." Marta hurried to take the dish, but Lady Elsbeth shook her head. "I'll stay, if you'll have me." The dining room is so terribly quiet with Father away at his club. Alaric watched from his place near the hearth as the initial awkwardness melted away. The servants clearly knew her well. The cook scolded her gently for not eating enough at dinner, while the housemaids shared village gossip that made her laugh. She sat on a simple wooden chair, her fine dress incongruous against the rough furniture. Yet she seemed more at ease here than in the formal dining room. When the tarts were distributed, she insisted Thomas take one, her fingers brushing his. As she passed the plate, the simple touch sent warmth spreading through his chest, even as shame pricked at him for deceiving her. Later, lying on his narrow pallet in the servants' quarters, Alaric stared into the darkness as realization struck him with the force of a physical blow. He was falling in love, not with the cold, ambitious lady of rumor, but with the real Elsbeth. Her compassion, her practical dreams, her genuine care for others had captured his heart completely. The irony twisted like a knife. She despised Prince Alaric, believing him incapable of the very qualities she showed in such abundance. Yet here he lay, a prince in servant's clothing, hopelessly drawn to the woman who thought him heartless. Sleep eluded him as he wrestled with the knowledge that every moment in her presence only deepened both his love and his deception. Dark clouds gathered over Albrecht Hall as thunder rumbled in the distance. The autumn storm arrived with shocking force, pelting the countryside with heavy rain and howling winds that rattled window panes throughout the estate. Near midnight, urgent pounding at the servants' entrance roused the household. The Miller cottage. A rain-soaked tenant farmer gasped out. "The roof's given way, milady. The whole family's trapped inside." Lady Elsbeth appeared in her dressing gown, already wrapping a thick cloak around her shoulders. "Fetch blankets and rope," she commanded. "Thomas, will you help carry supplies?" Alaric nodded quickly, grabbing lanterns while other servants gathered emergency provisions. Within minutes, they splashed through muddy lanes toward the affected cottage, rain stinging their faces in the darkness. The scene was chaos. The thatched roof had partially collapsed, letting rain pour into the humble dwelling. The Miller family, huddled in one corner, their youngest children crying as water pooled around their feet. "Mrs. Miller, bring the children to the hall's kitchen," Lady Elsbeth said firmly. "Thomas, help Mr. Miller salvage what we can. We'll need to work quickly before more of the roof gives way." For hours, they labored side by side in the storm. Elsbeth's fine nightdress became soaked and mud-stained as she passed bundles of belongings to safety, her golden hair plastered to her face, yet she never complained, focusing instead on comforting the frightened children. "There now, little ones," she murmured, wrapping a blanket around the youngest Miller girl. "Cookie always keeps warm milk ready at night. Shall we see if she'll add some honey for you?" Dawn broke gray and weary over the estate. The storm had passed, leaving devastation in its wake. Lady Elsbeth organized work crews immediately, directing repairs with practical efficiency. She worked alongside the men, handling wooden beams and fresh thatch with determined strength. Alaric watched in amazement as she balanced on a ladder, passing tools to the thatchers above. Her usually immaculate hands were rough with splinters and dirt, yet she seemed to glow with purpose. When the smallest Miller boy scraped his knee, she cleaned and bandaged it herself, distracting him with funny stories until he smiled through his tears. "You have quite a way with children, milady," Alaric observed quietly as they carried water to the workers. "They remind me that titles mean nothing in the face of genuine need," she replied. "A child doesn't care if you're a princess or a milkmaid. They only know if you're kind." That evening, exhausted but satisfied with the day's progress, Lady Elspeth requested Thomas's company for her nightly prayers in the chapel. Candlelight flickered over the simple altar as they knelt side by side on the worn stone floor. "Kai." Every day, she confessed softly, her voice barely above a whisper, not just for guidance or strength, but for understanding. "They say I must marry Prince Alaric of Hohenfeld, yet all I hear speaks of his pride, his distance from common folk. I pray for a husband who values compassion over titles, who sees worth in serving others." Alaric's heart clenched painfully. Her words struck him like physical blows, each one highlighting the depth of his deception. The truth pressed against his lips, desperate to be spoken. Perhaps he started, then faltered. "Perhaps the prince is not what rumors claim." "I could believe that," she sighed. "But how can a man raised in palaces understand days like today? The joy of helping others with one's own hands." Alaric stared at his own mud-stained fingers. Remembering the satisfaction of honest work, the connection forged through shared labor. The weight of his lies became unbearable. He opened his mouth to confess everything, but stopped. What if speaking? Truth now destroyed not only her trust, but also her faith in human goodness. Would revealing his deception taint every moment they'd shared, every genuine connection they'd formed? Unable to bear it, he bent forward until his forehead touched the cold chapel floor. "Dear God," he whispered, his voice breaking, "grant me wisdom. Show me how to honor both truth and love." Beside him, Elsbeth continued her quiet prayers, unaware of the torment in her companion's heart. Candlelight cast their shadows on the chapel walls, a lady and her servant, kneeling together before God, while secrets and truth hung suspended. Between them, like incense in the sacred air, Sunday morning dawned crisp and clear, the autumn air tinged with frost. Church bells rang across the countryside, calling the faithful to worship. The Albrecht household made its way to the village church in careful order, nobility in front, servants following behind. Inside the small stone church, warm sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns on the wooden pews. Lady Elsbeth took her place in the family's elevated box, her blue silk dress catching the light. Alaric filed in with the other servants, settling into the plain back benches where household staff always sat. Father Anselm's rich voice filled the church as he began the service. When the congregation rose to sing, Alaric's clear tenor joined the chorus of voices lifting skyward. During the second hymn, he felt a presence and looked up to find Lady Elspeth had turned slightly in her pew. Their eyes met across the social divide of the church aisle. For one breathtaking moment, they were simply two souls joined in song, all barriers of rank forgotten. The sunlight caught her profile, making her appear almost luminous. Then she turned back to her prayer book, but Alaric noticed her fingers trembling slightly on the pages. After the service ended, as the congregation began to disperse, Lady Elsbeth approached Father Anselm. "The books you mentioned for the chapel library have arrived," she said. "Thomas, would you help me carry them?" "Of course, milady," Alaric replied, following her to the priest's study where several crates of books waited. The chapel library was small but peaceful, with sunshine warming its oak shelves. As they unpacked the volumes, their hands occasionally brushed, sending sparks of awareness through them both. Rather than hurrying away, Elsbeth lingered, drawing out their task. "This passage always brings me comfort," she said softly, opening one leather-bound tome, but how God sees not as man sees, but looks upon the heart. "'Tis true," Alaric murmured, acutely aware of his deception even as he cherished these moments with her. The outer form matters little compared to the spirit within. She smiled, tracing the gilded letters on the page. You speak as one who understands Scripture well, Thomas. Have you studied much? I had a thorough education in my youth, he answered carefully. Though I find new meanings now, seeing faith live so genuinely in service to others. They continued discussing various passages, sharing favorite psalms and parables. Elsbeth's knowledge impressed him. She had clearly spent many hours in contemplation of sacred texts. Her interpretations showed both wisdom and compassion. I believe God's greatest commandment is love, she said thoughtfully, shelving another book. Not the fancy words or grand gestures, but daily acts of kindness. The way you helped the Miller family, for instance, that was love in action. Ulrich's heart squeezed painfully at her words. He wanted to deserve such praise, to be the simple, honest servant she believed him to be. Several days later, Elsbeth approached him in a quiet corridor. I have something for you, she said, reaching into her pocket. She withdrew a small, well-worn book of Psalms, its leather cover soft with age, for comfort when your duties weigh heavily. These words have often lightened my own heart. Their fingers touched as she pressed the book into his hands. The simple gesture felt intensely intimate, a noble lady sharing her personal devotional with a servant. Her eyes held his for a long moment before she hurried away, color rising in her cheeks. That night, while the other servants slept, Alaric sat alone in the servants' hall. A single candle cast dancing shadows as he opened the precious book. Her delicate handwriting filled the margins, notes, prayers, and reflections accumulated over years of reading. In my distress, I called upon the Lord, he read softly, tears gathering in his eyes as he traced her neat script beside the verses. Here was her heart laid bare, her hopes, fears, and deepest thoughts shared unknowingly with the very man she dreaded marrying. Her gift felt like undeserved grace. The simple Book of Psalms, offered in kindness to a mere servant, moved him more deeply than any royal treasure. Teardrops fell silently onto the well-loved pages as Alaric confronted the growing love in his heart, and the painful truth that threatened to destroy it all. The autumn weeks had settled into a gentle rhythm at Albrecht Hall when the messenger arrived bearing the royal seal. King Leopold would visit to formally discuss the marriage alliance. The news sent the entire household into a frenzy of preparation. Servants scurried through corridors with fresh linens and polished silver. Cooks labored day and night, preparing delicacies worthy of royal approval. The great hall gleamed with fresh beeswax on its ancient wooden panels, while gardeners trimmed every hedge to perfection. In the midst of the chaos, Sir Edmund cornered Thomas in a quiet passage. "You'll remain below stairs during the festivities," he ordered firmly. "We can't risk any disruptions during such an important occasion." Ulrich nodded, knowing the moment of truth approached. That evening, he slipped away to his hidden trunk of princely garments, heart heavy as he donned the familiar silks and velvets. The weight of his royal signet ring felt foreign after weeks of honest labor. The day of the king's arrival dawned clear and cold. Nobles from neighboring estates gathered early, filling Albrecht Hall with rustling silk and murmured speculation about the absent prince. Lady Elsbeth stood with her father near the grate, doors her cream-colored gown making her look like a winter rose. Trumpets announced the royal procession. King Leopold entered first, resplendent in ermine and gold, his stern face betraying no emotion. Behind him came the full court retinue, ladies-in-waiting, advisors, guards in gleaming armor. "My dear Baron Albrecht," the king declared, "I present my son, Prince Ulrich of Hohenfeld." Alaric stepped forward into the shocked silence. His rich burgundy doublet and gleaming sword marked him unmistakably as royalty. But his eyes sought only Elsbeth's face. She stood frozen, one hand pressed to her throat. The color drained from her cheeks as recognition dawned. This was Thomas, her Thomas, who had carried her books and worked beside her in the rain, who had listened to her dreams and shared her prayers, who had deceived her completely. "No," she whispered, barely audible. "It cannot be." The great hall erupted in whispers. Lady Catherine, Elsbeth's cousin, leaned close to a group of young nobles. "How scandalous!" she hissed loudly enough to carry. "Consorting alone with a man disguised as a servant. One wonders what liberties were taken." "Indeed, another noblewoman," replied such impropriety from our future princess, though perhaps she knew his true identity all along and merely played at charity to catch a crown. Each poisoned word struck Elsbeth like a physical blow. The room seemed to spin as weeks of innocent moments transformed into ammunition for scandal. Every shared conversation, every gentle smile, now twisted into something shameful. Alaric saw the horror and betrayal in her eyes. "My lady, please," he began, taking a step toward her. "Let me explain." But Elsbeth was already turning away, her skirts swirling as she fled the hall. Tears blurred her vision as she ran, heedless of the gasps and whispers that followed. Behind her, Alaric's heart shattered as he watched her disappear, his outstretched hand falling uselessly to his side. The damage was done. In moments, the tender trust they had built lay in ruins. The gentle footman who had won her confidence stood revealed as the very prince she had dreaded. And now, because of his deception, her reputation hung by a thread. King Leopold's voice cut through the gossip like steel. "Well, this is an unexpected development." His cold gaze fixed on his son. "We shall discuss this matter privately." But Alaric barely heard him. He stared at the doorway where Elsbeth had vanished, knowing that his attempt to test her character had only proved his own unworthiness. In trying to discover her true nature, he had destroyed any chance of winning her heart. The whispers continued, spreading through the crowd like poison. Lady Catherine's malicious smile promised that this scandal would grow far beyond the walls of Albrecht Hall, and somewhere in the maze of corridors. A lady who had dared to trust a humble servant wept alone, her dreams of a compassionate marriage. Lying broken at her feet, dawn painted the gardens of Albrecht Hall in soft golden light, but Alaric found no peace in its beauty. He paced the gravel paths between carefully tended roses, their autumn blooms hanging heavy with dew. His eyes searched desperately for a glimpse of cream-colored skirts or copper-bright hair. At last, he spotted her walking with Marta near the herb garden. Elsbeth's face was pale, her eyes rimmed with red from a sleepless night. When she saw him approaching, she quickly turned away, drawing her shawl close despite the mild morning air. "My lady, please," Alaric called softly. But Marta stepped between them, her usually friendly face stern with disappointment. "Her ladyship is not receiving visitors this morning, sir," the maid said firmly. Leading Elsbeth toward the kitchen gardens, Alaric watched them disappear behind the tall hedges, his heart aching. He waited in the gardens for hours, hoping she might return. The sun climbed higher, warming the late autumn air. Near midday, Elsbeth finally confronted him in the rose arbor. Her voice trembled with hurt and anger. "How dare you make a mockery of my trust?" "I never meant to cause you pain," Alaric said. "I only wished to know your true character, away from court pretense." "My true character?" Elsbeth's laugh was bitter. "While you played at being someone else entirely. You made me believe you were a man of humble virtue. Instead, you are just another nobleman who thinks common folk exist for his amusement." "That is not true," Alaric protested. "Every moment we shared was genuine. My title may have been false, but my heart was honest." "Your heart." Tears sparked in her eyes. "You listened to my private fears about marrying you. You heard me confess my dread of an arrogant prince, all while knowing you were that very man. Was it amusing to hear how little I thought of you?" Before Alaric could respond, voices drifted from the kitchen yard below. Two scullery maids whispered as they hung linens. "They say she knew all along who he was," one said. "Planned it clever-like, to catch herself a prince." "I heard different," replied the other. "That she let him take liberties, thinking him common. Now her reputation's ruined either way." Elspeth's face crumpled at the cruel gossip. "Do you see what you've done? My family's good name, generations of honorable service to the crown, all of it tainted because you wanted to play at being poor." Inside the great hall, more whispers circulated among the gathered nobility. Lady Catherine's poisoned words had done their work well. The scandal grew with each retelling, painting Elsbeth as either a scheming fortune hunter or a foolish girl who had compromised herself with a servant. King Leopold's fury, when it came, fell like a thunderbolt. He summoned Baron Albrecht, too, his temporary chambers, his voice carrying through the thick oak door. "This match is becoming impossible," the king declared. "My son's foolishness is one matter, but your daughter's behavior meeting unchaperoned with a man she believed common, it cannot be overlooked. Perhaps we should reconsider this alliance entirely." "Your Majesty," the baron pleaded, "my daughter is innocent of any wrongdoing. She has always served with honor. The king's voice rose sharply. "The Albrecht name has stood for loyalty to our crown for 3 centuries. Yet now there are whispers of scandal. Perhaps it is time to grant your lands and titles to a family more worthy of royal favor." Alaric, passing in the corridor, heard every word. The weight of what his deception had caused pressed down upon him like a physical burden. He hurried to his chambers, calling for parchment and ink. By candlelight, he began to write. The words poured out his shame at deceiving her, his growing admiration of her true kindness, his despair at causing her pain. He wrote of watching her tend to sick servants and share her food with the hungry. He confessed how her gentle heart had taught him more about noble character than any court training. But as he read over the tear-stained words, he knew they were not enough. No apology could undo the damage to her reputation. No explanation could restore her trust. The parchment blurred as fresh tears fell, smearing the careful script. Alaric crumpled the letter in his fist, then smoothed it out again, unable to destroy this testament to his remorse. But neither could he send it. What right had he to seek her forgiveness when his actions threatened everything her family held dear? The candle burned low as he wept over the unsent letter, his proud shoulders bowed with grief. Outside his chamber window, the autumn wind carried the sound of chapel bells calling the faithful to evening prayers. But for Alaric, there would be no peace this night. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the great hall, illuminating the gathered nobles in their finest silks and velvets. The air hummed with whispered speculation as King Leopold took his place on the elevated dais, his stern face betraying nothing of his thoughts. Lady Catherine stood among her circle of admirers, satisfied smile playing at her lips as she watched Elsbeth enter with her father. The younger woman's face was composed, though her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them before her. "My lords and ladies," King Leopold's voice rolled through the hall. "We gathered to address the matter of the betrothal between Prince Alaric and Lady Elsbeth of Albrecht." Before he could continue, Alaric strode forward. His royal attire gleamed in the morning light, but his bearing held none of its usual pride. To the gasps of the assembled court, he dropped to his knees before Elsbeth. "My lady," he said, his voice clear enough to reach even the servants watching from the gallery. "Before all these witnesses, I must confess my wrongdoing." Lady Catherine's smile faltered. This was not the spectacle she had anticipated. "I came to your home in disguise, doubting your character," Alaric continued. "Instead, I found a woman whose nobility puts mine to shame. While I played at being humble, you lived true compassion daily. You fed the hungry without seeking praise. You comforted the sick without concern for station. You showed me what true nobility means. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nobles exchanged sneers, but others nodded thoughtfully, remembering their own encounters with Lady Elsbeth's kindness. I cannot rule without such wisdom by my side, Alaric declared, still kneeling. Whatever my title, you have proven yourself the better soul. I ask your forgiveness, though I deserve it not. The hall fell silent. Even King Leopold seemed struck by his son's transformation. The proud prince, who had once dismissed council meetings, now knelt in submission before all. Elsbeth's face showed a storm of emotions: surprise, confusion, lingering hurt. Without a word, she gathered her skirts and walked from the hall, leaving Alaric still kneeling on the cold stone floor. The king rose, signaling the court's dismissal. Nobles filed out, their whispers now touched with uncertainty. Yet Alaric remained where he was, head bowed, as servants snuffed candles and swept the floors around him. He would wait there, he decided, until Elsbeth gave her answer. Evening shadows crept across the chapel floor as Elsbeth entered, her footsteps echoing softly. Before the altar, Alaric knelt in the same position he had maintained for hours, his shoulders bowed in prayer. Candlelight from dozens of beeswax tapers flickered across his face, showing lines of weariness and worry. He did not turn at her approach, but his voice carried clearly in the sacred space. I have asked God's forgiveness, he said softly. Now I ask yours. Elsbeth stood silent as Alaric continued, his words flowing like water. When I came here, I thought to judge your character. Instead, I discovered my own lacking: your kindness to the servants, your care for the villagers, your genuine desire to help others. These revealed the true meaning of nobility. His voice trembled with emotion as he spoke. I love you, not as a prince seeking a suitable match, but as a man who has seen the beauty of your heart. If you can forgive my deception, I pledge to serve our people with the same compassion you have shown, your hand in mine. The chapel fell silent, save for the soft sputter of candle flames. Elsbeth moved forward slowly, her silk skirts whispering. Against the stone floor, she knelt beside him, tears glistening in her eyes. You learned humility, she said softly, and in doing so, proved yourself worthy of both crown and heart. She reached for his hands, clasping them in her own. I forgive you. Their shared tears fell upon their joined hands as they prayed together, their union blessed in that sacred moment. In the days that followed, joy spread throughout the kingdom. On Sunday morning, Father Anselm read the banns of marriage, his weathered face beaming as both nobles and villagers filled the church with sounds of celebration. The wedding feast surpassed all expectations. King Leopold, his stern facade softened by his son's transformation, raised his goblet before the assembled guests. Today, we celebrate not just a marriage, but a lesson learned. True nobility rests not only in birth, but in virtue. My son and his bride shall rule with both. Servants and nobles alike cheered as Alaric and Elsbeth shared their first dance. Candlelight bathed the great hall in golden warmth as they moved together, exchanging a glance of perfect understanding. In that moment, all could see that the prince who had humbled himself as a servant had indeed won his bride's heart. Together, they would lead their people with the wisdom born of love and humility. Marta wiped happy tears from her eyes as she watched her mistress dance with her prince, knowing that the gentle footman Thomas and the noble Alaric had become one in service to love. Thanks for taking a moment to feel with me. If this story reminded you of what matters, hit subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow, continuing our story.